Hello all. Welcome to this brilliant webinar on tech hiring done right. Today we're going to talk about some great strategies to unlock your startup growth. And we are joined with Maulik Sailor from CodeMonk and Christophe Pasquier from Slite. And we're going to analyze a little bit of the current tech landscape, the factors that you may need to take into account when managing your technical teams during this very challenging environment. So I'd love if, Maulik, you could give a bit of an introduction on yourself and share a bit of your personal story, and then Christophe, if you could follow.
Yeah, cool. Thanks a lot, Vasu, for setting this one up. What can I say? You know, I mostly spent my career in product management, building product and product teams for enterprise as well as startups, and mainly for the startups, being involved in all that early stage MVP development and building the team around that is what I have done for nearly 10-15 years now. And we faced a lot of challenge. Like any early stage startup, you are always trying to find the best skills and are willing to build the product in the most agile and lean manner. And we realized that there is a problem. You can't really get access to skills as quickly as you would want to, and hence we started CodeMonk as a platform where we can enable the tech companies to build product teams on an on-demand basis, be able to mix and match. But before we even have customers, we need to have the MVP. So we built our team in a way where we are able to scale up and down as per our own roadmap. So we used a few talents directly that we knew from our personal network. And we also work with a few offshore agencies to provide capabilities whenever we needed to. So that's how we got started. And then once we had our initial MVP ready, we first being a platform, we had a lot of, we are trying to attract the talent to sign up to the platform. And then we started utilizing them to also build the platform as they go through our filtering process. So that's how we did.
Amazing. And Christophe?
Hey, folks. So thanks a lot for joining, and Vasu, thanks so much for organizing. So I'm Chris. I'm the founder and CEO of Slite. I'm based in Berlin. And so Slite, it's a company we launched 5 years ago that we started in remote and grew this way since then. We've raised 15 million with great partners like Spark, Index, and YC, went through YC. And so Slite is a tool that you can use today. You can go to slite.com and try it. It's free. It's very easy, and you probably all have a use for it. It's a workspace made for teams. And we really try to kind of like make it a place for all your team knowledge to let it come alive. So what we mean by that is that we really kind of optimize the experience to make it extremely easy for any type of knowledge to live there. We build the tools so that your docs and your information remains up to date. We help you identify the gaps of knowledge that are unanswered for your teammates. And more importantly, we just build like an AI plugin that lets you find answers just by asking. So you can just use your knowledge base the same way you use ChatGPT today, but obviously based on your documents. So yeah, that's what we do. And we are a small 40 people team. And we lived through the challenges of building a highly technical teams. Like we have something around like 20 developers in this 40 people team.
Amazing. I will add you both now into the spotlight as we start to run through the topic. So, of course, I guess the best place to start here would be when you both started your individual companies. How did you structure your tech team? Did you guys use in-house? Did you look for an agency, or did you use recruiters? And what learnings did you take away from that? Maulik, perhaps if you want to start.
Yeah, thanks, Vasu. I think I already touched on that. So we use some of the developers from our personal network. So we done direct recruitment, and we also use some agencies to help with certain skill set. We use recruiters in past, not for CodeMonk, but in a different setting. And for some reason, we never had a pleasant experience. Even we ended up hiring few talent, but we eventually let them go. So we were never keen on using recruiters pretty much everywhere. And we tend to work directly with the individual. We really tend to engage with them. And often if they come recommended from personal network, then even better. So that's what we do.
Yeah, on our end, it was similar experience, pure in-house. And I think I join you, Maulik, on this point, like, going through external recruiters often was bad experience. We did add like one good experience. So it does exist. Like we had like a headhunter called Willem Wijnans, which is now actually like working for Ashby, which is one of the leading ATS in the industry. And so, like he went from being like a very, very good recruiter to being like, part of this, tool making company for recruiters, which makes a lot of sense. But that's an exception. Like definitely, like it's hard, and mostly because the first hires that we made defined the company culture, and not having like the hand on how you kind of assess people, how you kind of like find the right cultural, but also kind of like fit in terms of personal development from the developers and so on is just makes it very, very hard to delegate this task, especially for the first 15, 20. I'm still not ready to delegate, by the way. Like actually we have like a head of well, she's not head of, but anyway, like somebody leading our talent acquisition, and she's so close to our culture that I know that we can fully trust her, and she has been absolutely amazing in that. So not only doing purely in-house, but finding the right person in-house to find the next person is absolutely like a killer.
So I guess if you both had one piece of advice that you could take from your experiences, what would you say a tech startup that needs to be aware of right now when they're building their tech teams to avoid any pitfalls that you may have already experienced? If you had to pick one each.
I think there are plenty, to be honest. And I think each of the factors that can go wrong, I think impact startups in different way. For one that I have seen over and over or experienced over and over myself is that when you are recruiting people or building your tech team, you're recruiting for your immediate needs, as in, certain gap in your team, certain skill set you're missing, and you're trying to fill for that. But in a product-led company, your backlog keeps on changing, and what's important today may not be important tomorrow, and vice versa. So that also has a knock-on impact on the team. So you may build the best team today, but in 6 months' time, that team may not be relevant to what you are trying to do, especially in the early stage, because you want to iterate faster. You want to be able to change your direction, pivot faster, and stuff like that. So I think try to optimize for flexibility. And of course, you need to build up your core knowledge and have that longevity also planned out. But try to focus on both, not only one thing. So, try to have more flexibility upfront. And then as you settle in, try to focus more on long-term stability.
And yourself, Christophe?
I think, I mean, a different topic, but if I had to select just one, since it's like what you said, I would say that looking back, like there is not many other part of your startup or your company that have the same compounding effects as recruitment. And, like I've seen it firsthand, recruiting somebody that is stellar will set the standard for the next hires to be either good or stellar, like it's kind of like at worst it will be good, but can't get worse than that. I had like, people, especially in the recruiting part of Slite, that have been like maybe good, average to good. And I've had like 1 year of like, not so good, overall hiring because of that. So being extremely demanding, especially on the first kind of like, few 5-10 hires, and daring to say no when you have like no time and where you're so small, that our, recruitment takes so much time is an extreme sacrifice, but also like something that you will kind of like get the reward from without any doubt. Like it's really worth doing.
Yeah, I guess it's quite interesting because a point that you both sort of vaguely go over is the need for great people quickly, right? Because obviously when you're in a startup, you need to be quick pace, you need to find the right people, but also you can't waste 6-7 months trying to find the right person or the right skill sets to be able to deliver your vision, because you either may have raised or you're going to raise soon and you're against various timescales. So in terms of that balancing act, it's obviously not simple, right? But how do you think is the best way to balance the need for speed and the need for quality when you're trying to build this technical team at the early stages? Very loaded question. Very loaded question. Happy for us to explore this rather than it being just a simple answer.
Really hard one.
I would say it's not easy. Let's say I don't think there is a white and black answer to this particular question. Having the right person, really good talent upfront is very important. But often what happens is you find the best person, but then that person may have certain other things going on and may not be maybe he joins you but then not able to continue for too long, or needs cannot join you immediately but may come on after a few months and so on. So that can also happen. And and again, timing is everything in startup. You need to be able to move faster, at least in the beginning. The speed is the most important part. So I would say, again, try to focus on talent that can help you go from A to B faster. What is the next milestone you want to achieve, and how quickly can you achieve that without compromising too much on the quality or the other parameters, right? Culture, I think we talk about, you can't really change your culture, or changing culture is really difficult at the end of your startup. Easier to set up upfront. So again, trying to balance all those factors out in the beginning is important. And on top of that, if things go wrong, as you start sensing that, hey, I don't really have the right person in the team, no matter how good he or she is, but maybe his or her behavior is not really not well in your team, or somehow it doesn't feel right, then better to stop and remove that instead of continuing. And I think a lot of founders don't tend to do that. They say, oh yeah, you know what, let's continue. We'll deal with it later. Later is only becomes a bigger problem to deal with. So try to deal with it upfront. Try to remove the problems upfront, whether it's about skills, about ways of working, about team culture, whatever. Try to remove that upfront. I had one more point, but I forgot that. But I'm sure it will come to my mind later.
I think I will stress on the latter of your part, but I think it also depends on the type of team that you're building and the type of product that you're building. Maybe we'll come back to that, but not every team needs the same type of people. If you are building a sales team, for instance, it's all about speed, I think, and processes, and the turnover and the kind of life cycle of a sales employee is very, very different from an engineer one, for instance. I think for me it will be quality over speed for sure, but at the same time, you can't be slow in a startup, obviously. One thing that I've seen company and friends, typically, we had that in a private YC group conversation this month, a couple of weeks ago, where somebody was saying, I have this perfect engineer, but I still have 4 interviews lined up. What do you think? Should I close this person? And everybody was unanimous. It was this person is an A+. Close this person as soon as you can. This person might slip, in 2 days that they might get another offer. You might not be as competitive as you are today, whatever the reason. But as soon as you have somebody that is really ticking all the cultural, technical boxes, and for sure, the speed becomes absolutely essential. But I also kind of stress that, taking anything that is average is even for engineers, is even if it's scarce resource, is absolutely a bad decision. And I've had so many issues with that, where we are happy to close a role that is tough to close. For instance, for us, backend has been like a big challenge, and we're happy to close it. And with someone that we knew was kind of like a bet, and it was just a mistake, and we did it multiple times. And to complement what you said, I think Maulik is something that is worth doing as well is building a relationship over the long term. Like maybe somebody is not ready right now. And I know that has been like something that also kind of help you gain speed despite having high quality standards, is having this pool of A talents that you build over the years, and you just like maintain a relationship. And maybe the person was not ready yet. Maybe the person has typically, like I've had the experience last year where now head of brand marketing, I approached her for product marketing role. Amazing person, and she ended up having like another like really good opportunity. Like we were about to close her, and she just had like something like massive in an hyper growth company and so on. And working with her mentor, like it was just like on old stuff, she was like, I love Slide, I want to work with Slide, but really right now, like I never had like such an opportunity and so on, and it was fine. And 9 months later, she was actually, like not appreciating the environment, and she came back to us, and now she's one of our best employees. So this is also essential to build this pool of.
You actually reminded me what I wanted to say. So you talk about A players, A teams, and A player, right? I think A players are really important. As within the tech, you always talk about technical debt. Over a period of time, your technical debt will always grow. And at some point, they will become unmanageable if you don't tackle them upfront. And same thing happens within your, I would say, the organization and the team, let's say, productivity or environment. I don't know how to define it. But the moment you have an okay player, a B player, or an average person, they will introduce like a debt, a process debt or productivity debt in your organization, and that will only keep growing, and it will stop adding to the overall efficiency of the org. So the moment you realize that, you just have to literally stop that and remove it, because there's a compounding effect, like Chris said, both on positive and negatives. So if you leave that negative in your org, it will just keep compounding over a period of time. And similarly, if you have really solid team players, it will keep compounding to deliver better outcomes as you grow.
Great points. Great points. I guess so. If you are in that situation where you're looking to hire and you're looking for an A player, and of course, he said it's a very competitive landscape generally right now because of the general environment. What would be your current take on the environment, firstly, and then secondly, how would that impact the current structure of how you're hiring and developing your team compared to, let's say, 2 years ago when the environment was slightly different? I think Christophe, perhaps on this one, you may have a few more experiences just based on that one example you gave, right, where she came back 9 months later, right? Oh, I think you're mute. Yeah.
Sorry. In that case, it was not linked to the environment. Like, and she left the company just because it was too intense. Like, it's the kind of company that 20x in 1 year or whatever. It was just like for her competitive mindset, it was just too much. So it was not linked, but I think right now, the way we see the landscape is really that last year was actually much easier to hire for us, at least the last 6 months of last year, than in the 2.5 years before. I think many founders can felt it, and unfortunately, like, it shows in the other way around for people on the market right now. It's much easier to hire right now than it was a few years ago, just because like the salary have gotten crazy, and just the level of funding had been like a really intense. Right now, like, since the whole kind of like investment landscape has frozen, it just like bring tech layoff for sure, or like hiring freeze. I know that in our case, that's the benefit of hiring well for a long time, is that we were able to just be a bit cautious and pause hiring for a few months before seeing, just like to be safe, and that was not at the cost of velocity, because we had hired like the right people. But I guess once again, it depends on on the level of runway of teams, on the level of quality of the people that they hired. I think if anything, the challenge right now is not that much on hiring, but more on the team motivation and kind of like, the psychological safety that we can give to them. Yeah.
So being a talent marketplace, we do conduct a lot of talent research and talent surveys within our community. And as such, our hiring process or anything has not changed. But what we see within the talent community is the way they approach a new role is changing. I think within the tech community, the lines between a freelance and permanent is really blurry now. You often have freelancers staying longer compared to permanent. And similarly, at times you can get more out from freelancers as well as get more commitment from them compared to permanent. Similarly, talents, they are evaluating that, do they really want to be with one employer for too long? What works for them? So I think there is change in behavior on the talent side. One thing which we have found is talents are more committed to themselves, their own career, rather than to an employer. They want ultimately an outcome for them. What makes any project, any job role, any employer that helps them to achieve their own career goals is what they want to go for. Even if they have to compromise on salary or something else, they're willing to do that. Again, remote working, work from home is one of the key demands within the tech community now. So I think these kind of behaviors are becoming more strong because of the recent events, like pandemic was one, but also the tech layoffs and all. Because during the layoff, some of the very good talents at top companies were let go, even when they have been there for many years, right? So I think talents are now starting to reevaluate on what works for them.
Interesting, super interesting. We've got a few questions in the chat, so I thought we'll go through them before we continue through. Tony asks, can you approach investors without a full team? I guess it's something we see here at Seedlegals as well, just generally, where you'll see a founder who may not be technical, maybe requiring a CTO, maybe needing some developers. How do you guys think companies should approach that?
I would say it depends on what the startup is about. I have been involved in a startup where they raised funding before having the product or the product team. Similarly, I have been in startup where we build the product and the product team and pretty much bootstrapping the entire product until we got to a moment where we were comfortable to go out and raise funding and all. So I think it really depends on what you are building. I tend to differentiate between a tech startup and tech-enabled startup. If your startup is tech startup, like a hardcore deep tech startup, then you do need to have a tech CTO or a co-founder in place. Without that, investors will not fund it. But if you are a tech-enabled startup, then I think you can go and raise the funding if you are able to demonstrate the market demand for it before even building the product.
Yeah, very much agree. I mean, we're not speaking about the question of Tony was not necessarily on without a technical person on board, and I think your precision is very good. If you are launching something that is whatever blockchain product and you have no technical background, that's probably a good moment to pause and look around and find somebody to do it with you. But if it's technical, as you say, a marketplace or something that is more commodity right now, technical wise, definitely possible. I started Slite actually without co-founder, without a team, with a pre-seed investor since day one. It was actually one of the reasons, I wouldn't have launched such an ambitious product that I knew would take years before reaching the basic need of the market. We are against, Google Docs and, Confluence and these kind of tools that have taken years to be built. And so I knew that we needed funding straight away. So yes, it's possible. And I would even say that it's needed for certain type of product. With the precision that Maulik said, if you are building something where, the community aspect, for instance, is absolutely key and you don't have anybody that is really deep and, anchored in this community, that's a problem. If you don't are building a deep tech startup and don't have this very tough, big skills embedded in your co-funding team, that's a problem. And I don't think investors will put into it, but that's just first principle thinking.
Great. Great. I guess this leads on to a little bit of the discussion we were having, but also just broadly, how do you think they should look to think about ways of compensating early tech hires when they might be pre-revenue?
So I would say most of the startup will be pre-revenue, when they are hiring their first startup. You may have raised funding or you're bootstrapping, but you will most certainly be a pre-revenue startup. So depending on which stage you are, let's say you're trying to get your CTO in place, 100% go for equity, right? Because if your CTO is asking a very high salary upfront before you have funding or you have any revenues in place, there's no way you will be able to kick it off unless you're willing to fund everything from your pocket. So I think equity makes sense at that stage. But then I would say a lot of developers, you're not looking for your CTO, you're just trying to get a proof of concept or MVP developed. Then most of these developers will not be interested in your startup success. They will just looking to get the job done. So just try to figure out how you can afford them. What is the best price? Get some competitive quotes. Speak to a few more people. Get some expert advice and so on to figure out whether you can just pay them and get the work done. Because often it's not an easy answer because depends on what you are doing. If you can just get some hire a remote developer, get something done cheaply, demonstrate a proof of concept, and then raise funding behind that, and then build your tech team, that's also is possible.
I think it comes down to your answer right before, right? If it's a tech-enabled startup, if you are literally building something that is, where your your differentiator, your moat won't be the tech, but will be the go-to-market motion, maybe your personal brand, this kind of thing, then this is possible. And as Maulik said, I think people, developers and agency, or somebody said in the chat, the dev shop might be interested to build it and really it need for a very cheap amount, you can have good enough product to show that good enough marketplace or whatever the product is, once again, with your special sauce, whatever it is, your personal brand, the stuff that you think will uniquely differentiate you, will be enough to reach product market fit. Then that's good enough. But indeed, I think what you early tech hires, pre-revenue, pre-funding, not paid, it's called the co-founder basically, or it's called yourself.
Yeah, I tell a personal story on the topic. So we used to have a digital studio and dev shop that we used to run before CodeMonk. And we used to work with startups to build the product for equity and so on. And I was approached by 2 students to build a product. They had no money. They had, I would say, very minimal money, 4,000 or 5,000 pounds that they saved up. And no one wanted to build the product. They said nothing can be done in this budget. And for some reason, I like them. I really like them as a person. And I said, you know what? I'm going to help you build something that can demonstrate the concept you have. So we built a literally throwaway proof of concept without any intelligence behind it. And you can manually hack it behind the scenes to demonstrate how it's going to work, the product. They took that product to Forward Partners. I'm going to mention the name, who invested 600K pre-seed into them to build the actual product then. And within 2 years, they managed to sell the entire business to a bigger corporate. So the founder is Leo Barnes. And then he wrote an article about how I was the only person who said yes to him to actually build something, which was not even a product. It was just a proof of concept. You just could do it on an Excel, to be honest, to demonstrate how it was working or was supposed to be working, right? So I would say it's possible. You can get, just think about what do you need to get done next to achieve your next milestone. Figure out the best possible way to get there, whether it's to build an internal team, whether it's to build a remote team, work with a dev shop, or whatever else, right? Just figure out which is the best approach and just go for it.
Awesome. We are about halfway through now, so we're going to go through a few more questions and topic points, and then we'll return back to the questions in the chat at the end. So don't worry, we will go through your questions very, very shortly. So one point I wanted to bring up, especially after that story of yours as well, is both companies, CodeMonk and Slite, obviously operate fully remotely, right? A lot has changed since COVID hit, and it's made things a lot easier. But what made you decide upon your current team structure of fully remote in the current landscape? Was that because of finding the right team? Was it because the best people have become borderless? Love to hear both your perspectives on that.
Yeah. So for me, I have always worked in a distributed remote team setting. Like, right from my first job back in 2003, I worked in remote teams. Remote back then was like, okay, you have a team in a different country, but they're still coming to an office in one location to work together. Now people are working from home. That's the major difference for me. So for me, remote was always part of my career. And when we set up CodeMonk, incidentally, it was during pandemic. We were working on it before pandemic, but we launched during pandemic. So by choice, we went to fully remote working. I'm proud to say my current team, almost 25 of us, most of us has never met in person, and they have been working with me for more than 2-3 years now.
Yeah, similar. Like I started in remote since the beginning. So it was not really a choice. I feel that this is kind of what you say, Maulik. Like it was just obvious. Our first employee, like the first person that we had a chance to hire, and that was a friend of a friend, a great developer, and that I knew we had a cultural fit with, was 1 hour away from where we used to work with my co-founder in Paris. And it was just obvious that this was not a problem. And we were like nurtured with buffer stories and, like how it could enable, more happiness. And I think how it could enable as well, like people, like finding people, not only that are better technically, but just that were making you happier to work with every day. So yeah, that was kind of like the logic move. And then like as we grew, like we started to reach a point where we started to say, okay, let's embrace it like 100%. Let's completely kill the side office that we had where we still had half of the team, and let's hire people anywhere. And we had like at some point 1 person in Seoul, 1 person in Sao Paulo, and a lot of people in between. And that was wild. I think it's not a good choice to have like 12 hours of time zones. If I can give like an advice, I actually think that it's much better to be in the same time zones, more or less, like 3-4 hours. So that's something that I would not have done in Insight again. But beside that, like remote, I think is very, very liberating. It let me move from Paris, where I was not the most happiest and where I used to live all my life, to Berlin, where I'm so much happier. So, purely not as a work and business story, but really as a personal aspect, I think it's also a way for us humans to be happier. So, yeah.
And just adding on that one more point, right? For me, it's not about whether you're remote first or not, right? Even if you want to build your team, let's say in London, you're trying to recruit all the tech team within the city, talents simply do not want to come to the office. Most of the talent don't prefer going to the office anymore. But then there are a lot of other factors like, commuting costs, not everyone is productive at the same time. Some people are more productive in the morning, some are more productive in the afternoon. So it's just an asynchronous work patterns, which is what you are dealing with. And regardless of the location, that's what you need to solve for.
Brilliant. That brings on a very interesting question in my mind. So you obviously historically have gone through, as you said, remote being from day one, right? It wasn't really a choice. It was sort of a matter of necessity, a matter of really being able to be more flexible with what you would like. But would you say ideally, this is something obviously that you mentioned, Christophe, is the ideal scenario that you have people in-house, regardless of the external circumstances, ideally in-house, or would you say remote is still better, or permanent and freelancing? Out of all of those four, which would you say is the perfect mix?
I guess since you mentioned like what I said before, like I think what I said like when I raised this point was it depends on the type of business, right? And I can only speak for myself, but So in-house or remote, I do think there is like, I regret some part of in-house. I think especially in the early days, like in the first year. So for instance, we went to Y Combinator and so incubator in San Francisco. We brought like 8 people with us. So we had this big house in Sunnyvale, 8 people working like all day long, all together for 3 months. And, you know, like, of course it was intense. And of course, you know, in many regards, it's unhealthy, but it's still like one of the best moments of my life. Like it is, you know, like it is fun when you are with people as passionate and as intense as you to be, you know, doing ping pong of ideas in sync, in live all day long. And that's something that you can't have with remote. So I don't think there is, I definitely think there are situations where in-house is better. I think for design, it's much better. I think for creativity, I think it can be much better. And usually what we do is we try to kind of mix both and to have like in-house or kind of like on-site in a way moments where we gather and we have like these kind of moments really concentrated in a few days. In terms of permanent or freelancers, I really think it depends on business. And I know that we don't necessarily have the same view with you, Maulik, but for me, for my type of business, it's what I think we told in the first preparation call, like a small team of 10 people built Instagram. We have one of our old, I mean, it's no longer a competitor, was called Quip, which was bought by Salesforce for 1 billion. They were like 12 engineers. And the thing was, you know, big deal, right? Like you don't need like a lot of people if you find like really good people, but that doesn't work with freelancers, I believe. Like you need like people that have shared passion, you need people that are buying interest, so equity. And you need to have like this form of very strong personal relationship to have like the ability to give radical feedback, to help people grow, and to you really like build, you know, shape the team as one. And that's just not the deal that you make when you take freelancers.
Yeah, well, I partly agree with you and partly disagree, because I agree that you got to have the right person. You know, that is the number one thing. And for me, once you have the right person, remote, in-house, you know, permanent, freelance, it simply doesn't matter to me. It's just a paperwork for me and a different compliance that you're trying to achieve. But for me, I always go for the right person. That if we get the right person, whatever works for that person, we try to make it happen.
Would you say, so obviously you're both slightly differing in opinion here, but even from an investor's perspective, right? If they're looking at you as a business, would they look at you slightly more unfavorably if you were more towards the freelance side of things or more remote, or would there be more of a favorability to in-house and full-time?
I would say definitely in past, I have seen investors asking for in-house teams that, hey, you need to have all your developers in-house, you need to have your tech team in-house, and all those things. I have seen that in past. But I think going forward, I think investors are realizing that a lot of good businesses are operating on a fully remote basis. A lot of them tends to have remote teams in different countries, and you have a lot of solutions available in the market now, you know, like CodeMonk as a sourcing platform. You have employer of record providers, you know, payroll providers. You can enforce your confidentiality and all of those things through like, you know, tons of SaaS providers. So I think you can achieve the same outcome that you're trying to achieve with an in-house team, you know, with modern tools. So I think now is not a concern, to be honest.
I agree in a way. Like I think you're right. Like it shouldn't be a concern, and I actually think that. I mean, it goes two ways. Like I think if you have investors that are like kind of like giving feedback or giving criteria on that, honestly, like it's good flag to not go with these people. Like it feels like very much like an insurance move. Like it doesn't feel like something that investors should. I mean, at any stage, like really they shouldn't have, like they can give ins or insight, but not like give kind of opinion on this kind of thing. I believe the only case where they should, and honestly, like the founders should as well kind of like have like a different opinion, but that is once again like the scenario that I think Maulik you described, which is, you know, you have like some form of uniqueness, some form of moat that you need to defend. If it's technical and you don't have like the team that is bound to your success and that is not full-time engaged in your success, that's a big problem. If you are like making a crypto, you know, like whatever, a security company, and your head of security is like somebody absolutely incredible that's, has worked in the red team of Apple security for years, but the catch is that this person is a freelance, you kind of like will struggle selling that to investors. While if the person is full-time and, has vested in interest with you, then like, you have the best pitch ever to build this kind of business.
Yeah, I mean, I agree to that, because then your business is dependent on that person.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking on security, then, do you guys worry with freelancers or, for example, those who aren't permanent about, for example, your own personal IP, them going and using it somewhere else? Is that ever a concern?
So again, I have slightly radical view here. We tend to trust people more in our organization. We let them do the right thing. I think within corporate security or enterprise security, there's a wise wisdom that most of the time the leak or the problem happens because of the human error. That human can be anyone, your internal employee or external employee, but it happens mainly because of the human error. So if you try to define your workflows, your onboarding, your security policies, the tools that you use in a way where you're trying to remove that human error, then I think it doesn't matter where these people are and whether they're internal or external.
Yeah, I in a way, I think that's slightly kind of different, maybe way to look at it, but I think same answer. Like, if it touches something that is critical to your business, there is, reasons to be cautious and to be attentive about the security issue. But if that's the case, then I wouldn't kind of use like freelancers. Once again, I would want this person to have vested interest. If it touches whatever to your front end, like to the website, I don't care. Like what's the security risk right there? And the only parts that is core to Slite or that is dangerous that I think we've had like this kind of issue where it was kind of like not core enough for us to internalize at the moment, but it is tricky, is everything that is linked to actually security. So, penetration tests, audit of our platform, like having external security consultants actually trying and, really trying to kind of fuck with our platform, but on demand, right? Like we pay them to do so. That's something that's, you definitely give kind of like permission to someone to, be aggressive, but the reality is that that's their job. So if you kind of like find the right person and have good recommendation, some people are like that's their job to, like do this in a respectful manner and not, kind of like break your platform while doing this kind of audits. And in fact, like this person, like the person that used to do that as a freelancer, we ended up hiring full-time because the person was so good. And we had like, it showed, I think we had like already a very strong trust relationship. That's the only exception where I think this could be a challenge.
Amazing. So we do have only 15 minutes left. So there's quite a lot of questions. So what I thought would be great is if we can just perhaps try and summarize on each side. Perhaps if you guys can, if you have any final piece of advice to give the startups or anyone looking to expand their tech team currently, or even looking to build their first MVP in the current landscape, what would that be? And then we'll jump into the questions in the chat.
So
a very broad question.
Yeah.
So I think I can summarize it depending on your startup. If it's a deep tech startup, then definitely have a CTO or a tech decision maker in-house. If it's a tech-enabled startup, then you don't really need a CTO in-house. You can work with remote or external developers or DevOps. For me, focus on the speed, focus on the outcomes, hire the best talent wherever you can find them. Don't worry about the paperwork and all that, because that's just a compliance that you are taking. Of course, you need to get it right. And trust people to deliver the outcomes for you.
I think I agree with what Maulik just said. Like, and it comes down to what we repeated multiple times. Like, if your unique insight, if your magic sauce, if whatever, like, will make your your value proposition unique, is tech related, then you should definitely kind of like already have the co-founder, honestly, like if that's not the case already, or you should build a tech team around that. And if you have a co-founder, you can probably find funds if it's something that resonates enough with investors. And if you think that you need funds to achieve that, if not, just build it, right? And if it's not the case, like if your unique insight is on something else, like go-to-market strategy, brand, whatever, then like this should be the least of your concern. Like, you know, like find a bit of money, get a freelancers to kind of build the MVP and, you know, like just like already kind of make money out of it, or like make it good enough to raise money, like and find a team after. But it's like, it's actually secondary.
Amazing. Perfect. I guess, should we jump into some questions? The first one I just wanted to ask is, Ivan asks, they're looking for some support with finding technical people for their project. I guess CodeMonk is the perfect place to go, right, Maulik? What would be the best place for Ivan to go and get some information on that?
Yes, of course, CodeMonk is there. But I would say, yes, give CodeMonk a try. But I would also suggest, leverage your personal network. We like, personally, me, I always ended up recruiting a lot of good people from my personal network. So that should be your first point of call. You have platforms like CodeMonk and quite a few of our competitors as well that you can leverage. You have like specialist job boards. So if you're looking for a data scientist, there are job boards only working or attracting data scientists. I think there's workinstartups.com, which only focuses on startup jobs and so on. So I think you have quite a few avenues here, but rely on your personal network would be my number one preference.
Brilliant. So the next question is from Rahel. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. She asks, what are your thoughts on using an external dev agency until you can find the right tech people to join in-house? That's what she's been using to date, but growing and scaling, so figuring out whether to hire an in-house team or continue with a dev agency, similar to what Calendly did. She's currently a solo founder with some tech background, but isn't a developer, and the startup is in the SaaS/marketplace sphere.
So again, before CodeMonk, I used to run Innovify, which was our dev studio. And we worked with a lot of founders, I think 50 plus founders, helping them to build their MVPs, and quite a lot of them raised funding. One of them actually ended up becoming a unicorn as well. So my views are a little bit biased, but yes, you can work with any dev shops. Find the right one.
Amazing. Okay. Next question is from Nikolaus. What if you are a tech-enabled startup and you partner with a dev shop? Any issues with that?
I think I just said that.
I guess it's the same question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The same question, yeah.
Okay. How much equity is fair to give to a CTO once you have an MVP already?
Equity and fair are not compatible. No, but I mean, that's the reality. Like when you like speak with enough founders and with enough teams, like you realize that every equity story is different, and there is absolutely nothing that is fair or not fair. And the reality is that you want a situation where your CTO is engaged on the long run. If you think this person is like great and is really like who you need on the long run, and you want to work with this person on the long run, be as generous as you can. Honestly, like the first months of the work are rarely the most important. Any startup is a very, very long run game. That would be my personal opinion. Like, I don't think it's even 50-50 is envisaged, possibility. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. I would say the earlier you are, the more equal you should be having.
Yep.
But as you progress and people joining later, of course, they will having lesser and lesser equity.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, equity is a funny thing, right? It's useless if you're not successful. And the chances of success is like what, less than 1%? So, yes, you need to get it right. But in reality, as long as you both are happy with your arrangement, I think that's what matters more.
Yeah. And maybe like just an advice, actually, put vesting for yourself and for your CTO. That's also like very, very like, I mean, it feels obvious, but I do know that people don't always do that. Like that's probably one of good criteria to kind of like feel comfortable doing this kind of moves. If you kind of put like a vesting of 2 years of cliff and 2 extra years of vesting, So that, like if after 1 year and a half, you've been paid each other, whatever, but just the relationship doesn't work, you don't end up with like a completely broken cap table where you go to an investor and you say, well, yeah, there is this 30% that belong to somebody that won't work any longer for us. That's really, really like bad for the whole company. So I think be as generous as you can, but in the context of like you have, this security in both sense, by the way, to, not completely break the cap table in case something doesn't go perfectly well.
Okay, amazing. So Jess Gordon asks, how do you optimize your interview process to identify those quality A players while also moving quickly?
I can go first as well. A lot of A players, really good talent actually do not hate lengthy interview process. If you ask them to jump more hoops, they will simply not going to do it because they're good. They will be in demand and they'll just go with the company that is most attractive and least friction. And they are also assessing you actually as part of that process, that how difficult are you to work with. So it's trying to find the balance between the two, that, hey, how can you quickly assess their skills and their attitude without asking them to go through a lot of technical tests and case studies and all of those things. Generally, I tend to do maximum 1 or 2 calls with this anyone that we interview or hire, and generally within the first 15-20 minutes, whether you're going to hire this person or not, right? And to be honest, I don't think I should feel sorry for it. But normally, if I know it's not going to go anywhere, within 5 minutes, I'll just be open and say, like, look, guys, I don't think we will be able to work together. You may be very good, but I don't think I can work with you or you can work with me. And I'll end the call, right? So I think just design one where you can get that decision fairly quickly.
That's I wish I think I do the same, like, often, but I know that I've been guilty of dragging like some interviews just because I was too sensitive about being upfront with people. So I think that's a great
yeah.
feedback.
No, but Christophe, I learned this hard way. Whenever I do that, I actually tell them the reason why I don't think it will work out, right? And sometimes the problem is me. And I accept that look, it's my problem. You're good, but it's my problem. This is what I like, and I think you're gonna hate that thing about me.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just something that I try to do fairly quickly.
One thing that I can add on that is like the best kind of criteria. I mean, beside the first step, because that's like kind of like I think you're right. Like you have like a gut feeling for 15 minutes, but then like we always have the same kind of like scheme overall. Like it's screening, first hiring manager interview, which is usually like kind of a second screening, like a long interview, test, and then like kind of like just peer interviews, but it's not like it's usually not a moment where you will dismiss the person. Reference check and hiring. And assessment is obviously super, super important. Like designing a good assessment is incredibly hard, but it's so useful. Like it's so clear when you have somebody that kills your test. And for developers, it's so easier. Like you just, well, I mean, you need to have somebody technical enough to kind of run it. But once you did, like just having a project that you pay, we always pay for a project that we make people work on, is extremely valuable. I think the last kind of like, the last wall, like the last kind of like barrier that is actually in Insights been proving like the most kind of like accurate test is reference check. Like we always do reference check, we never skip it. And even if you think that, reference check come from the people, like we don't call like the relationship of the person, like we ask them for introduction. You can identify some gaps there when they don't want you to speak to X and Y. That's usually like, something to dig in the interview. But usually people are open enough to do it. And even if like it's people that they referred you to speak with, it's actually very easy to just have like blunt feedback. Like I have 15 minutes of call. I always have the same script, and I always ask like anecdotes of the best moments. So I put people in good mood, like just, tell me the stories where this person excelled. And it makes it easy for the next question, which is anecdote of the moment where the person let you down the most. And people are incredibly honest, even if they are friends of the person and so on. And it's not bad. Like, it's actually like almost pre-onboarding, because these moments, like these notes, I keep them for like, you know, the first 3 months of the person onboarding when I hire them. And it's actually like, just like you already know what the person weaknesses and point of developments are already. And it just makes you win so much management time. And the last question that I asked, which is a bit aggressive, but it's actually very, very good, is just like, if you had to rate your work experience, like, you know, how good, you know, like it was, how easy it was to work, how much the person delivered and so on 0 to 10 scale, what would it be? And the people are so upfront, and it's so easy to ask the complementary question, which is the one that has value, which is what will make it go to 10? And all these kind of like small questions let you detect the gaps that people have been working with this person for 2 years, 3 years, whatever, like know better than anybody else, better than the person often. So I think that's a very, very like strong way to detect a player. Like usually these gaps they are like, you know, pointed developments, but you know that they are not going to be a challenge for this person to succeed and your team. And if anything, they are like points that you will be able to help them with.
Yeah, but I understood one more difference between your hiring process and ours. We never reference check actually.
I recommend it so much. Like reference check are the best. I think it's the best tool. It's so easy. It's so fast. Like it's in literally 15 minutes. Like and as I say, like it makes me win literally 2 months of insights on what is like the big challenge, the current big challenge of the person when they arrive at Slite.
We do background checks as in their ID and KYC and all of those things, but as a personal reference, we never do.
Yeah, no, agreement. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not background check.
Yeah.
Awesome. Just 2 minutes remaining. So final 2 questions here. How do you structure your team's working week? Do they work set hours, perhaps have weekly objectives to complete at times that suit their work/life balance? That's the first question.
Yeah. So ours is fairly simple. We do not have working hours. We just tell everyone just work whenever you feel your best. But making sure that you're not blocking your team. If your team is blocked, then you got to unblock them immediately and focus on the outcomes. What is the one thing you want to achieve today, and just make sure you achieve that. Right now, you can achieve that during the morning, afternoon, night is up to you. Surprisingly, our teams tend to coordinate between them really well. Actually, our core product development team is in, I think, 4 continents, and you know, they just speak to each other, make sure everything is known. They unblock each other. At times they're chasing me in the middle of night, said, "Hey, Maulik, you know, you need to do this one before you get up in the morning, or the moment you get up in the morning, you got to unblock us here." And you know, it's working well for us.
Yeah, similar. Like we have absolutely no set times, and people like come and go. And I mean, like literally, if people like were not spending a day walking, I don't think I would notice.
Yeah. Oh, one thing, you know, when remote working, people talk about remote working, they then talk about time tracking, making sure you're working at certain times and all. And I advise against that. You know, if you trust people, you know, trust is the most important part in remote working. You're hiring someone who's you probably never going to meet them, and you're trusting them to do the work. Then you actually should trust them to do the work. And most often you will again very quickly figure out whether they are productive or not. And even if they're not productive, what is the blockers? And if you have an open conversation, so you will be able to identify that and remove those. But then at the same time, you may occasionally come across some bad players who are just taking a piss. And as I said earlier, you know, just don't be afraid to take the call and let them go.
Awesome. We have reached the end, but just 30 seconds on this final question. How do you create an organization culture where most people work remotely or are freelancers?
I think that, yeah,
sorry.
exactly. I think you said it like trust and ownership. Like, I think that's
exactly.
Probably
I was going to say the same thing. It's trust, focus on the outcome, and get the best people.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you all for listening in. And most of all, thank you, Maulik and Christophe, for your thoughts. We will be sending a recording of this afterwards, and of course, any information on both companies. So thank you all for listening in. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Vasu.